So to go ahead and introduce our special guest tonight, we have Reuben Langdon. Reuben has been a friend of my father's. You guys have met and hung out once all the way back in 2012. If anybody has read UFO of God, they have seen where Dad went to this event out in Bucks County, PA called The Gathering, and Reuben was one of the special guests there that night, and they clicked. And I remember all those years ago, Dad coming home and telling me, hey, I met a friend. You might be really interested in this. He plays in video games. Have you heard of Devil May Cry? And I was like, yeah. And I have to tell you, Reuben, I remember the first time I ever saw Devil May Cry. When I was a kid growing up in a really Christian house, that wasn't a game that I owned because it had devil in the title. Yep. But I wanted to play it so bad. And I remember being like, I think I was like a 10-year-old boy seeing it. Oh my God, you can fight the devil. This is so cool. Like, this is a Christian game, but it just was a very nostalgic thing for me. And then Dad meeting you all those years later, I always thought Devil May Cry was so cool. So we started chatting right before the holidays. And what did I do? I got a Steam Deck for Christmas. So I was like, why not? Devil May Cry 5 is going to be my first game. Got it on a $10 sale. I beat it in like 3 days. It was so good.
Wow.
It was so good. So for those listening, Reuben has a very long, very colorful list in voice acting, stunt work, motion capture. I'm assuming you're very proficient in martial arts to do a lot of this motion capture. And I saw you on Power Rangers, by the way, big rep there. And what did I miss there? Acting, stunt work, motion capture, and voice acting for anime and video games.
Yep.
So without further ado, we have our special guest, Reuben Langdon. Woo!
Thanks, Ryan. Nick, thanks for having me. I'm a fan of your show. I have been once I found out from your dad that you were doing a podcast, I checked it out, and I love the subjects you guys cover. They're near and dear to my heart, including the video games. But I like the philosophy and the esoteric stuff. It's amazing work you guys are doing.
That's awesome, man. Thank you so much. And same to you with the work you're doing. And it's very cool stuff. And I got to say, I want to talk a little bit about Devil May Cry 5. We're not going to sit here and there's so much more stuff we want to talk about, but how cool of a synchronicity is that what was it, guys, last week or just the week before we put out our Kabbalah episode? And then
like
playing through Devil May Cry 5, the majority of the symbolism is Kabbalah.
Yeah.
Like the whole point of the game.
Which until you texted me and pointed it out, I wasn't really following that thread. And then thinking back about it, I was like, oh yeah. I mean, I'm a fan of Kabbalah and know a little bit, the Tree of Life and some of the esoteric studies, but I never made that connection. So thanks for pointing that out.
Yeah, no, it kept sticking out to me because, like, first of all, you're climbing a demonic tree, right? It's a tree, and central to Kabbalah symbolism is the Tree of Life. But that's not what gave it away. What gave it away was from the very beginning, they keep saying the Qliphoth tree, and I'm like, Qliphoth, I've heard that. And I looked it up, and Qliphoth in Kabbalah lore is like, remember, guys, when we did the Kabbalah episode, and it was like they described the realms as like layers of, like, they use this language that's like the realms are wearing other realms like layers of clothing.
Yes.
So Qliphoth in actual Kabbalah is like a dark layer. It's like the layers that permeate the realms where there's negative or evil energy. So they believe if there's a dark force, it exists within the realms of the Qliphoth. And the whole plot of Devil May Cry 5 is you're climbing to the top of the Qliphoth tree to save Dante, voiced by our friend Reuben. You're climbing the Qliphoth tree to save Dante, but here's the catch. You're climbing to the top to defeat the Demon King Urizen, but when you get to the top, you realize you're actually at the bottom. And it's like as above, so below. So you spend like 3/4 of the game going all the way to the top of the tree, and then you get there, and Dante's up there. You fight Virgil at the top of the tree, which is Dante's brother. Sick fight, by the way. And then you get up there, and you're like, oh wait, we got to actually get to the real top, which is down in hell.
Whoa!
So it's like as above,
cool.
As above, so below.
We didn't talk about the Qliphoth tree in the episode.
I wasn't aware of that.
That's so cool.
So it's just super cool. And like, obviously you play through, 3/4 of the game as these other characters, Nero and V, and they were really cool, but I was like, give me the Dante. and then you get to Dante. And I have to say, like, from just like a nerdy, Japanese action game fan, like the mechanics of actually playing Dante is genuinely, I'm not just saying this because you're here listening. It's genuinely one of the best fighting characters. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. Like the way the mechanics flow into one another and the different styles, and it's super sick, man. And the lines are crazy. Like, you definitely killed it, but that's awesome. So
Yeah.
well,
Throughout your history voicing Dante, while you were doing that, did you pick up any of the spiritual symbolism from like his story or even the surrounding, like the world?
A little bit, I think what's unique about the game is it has a basic story of sort of feuding brothers,
mhm.
and
Right.
one leaning towards evil, one leaning towards good, or pro humanity and against humanity, and so that sort of family feud, I guess you could call it. um, and there was a resonance there, I think, that when a lot of people played it. Plus, so I actually didn't start voicing the character Dante until Devil May Cry 3, which was sort of a reboot in itself. It was
Right.
1 and 2 came out, and then 3 was given to a new director, Itsuno-san, and the original creator and director for 1, he left Capcom. So Capcom was kind of like, okay, can you reboot this? Can you do something cool with this? And then the character himself was sort of this rebellious teenager, kind of stuck in a situation that he didn't want to be in. So I think a lot of people and kids of that generation of like early 2000s were, I know myself, were just sort of feeling that vibe of not fitting in and being pressured to do something we didn't really want to do or something like that. So we weren't jiving with the mainstream 9-to-5 job, go get the degree, go become a lawyer, a doctor, and make everybody happy. So a lot of people were kind of not resonating with that storyline at that time. So there's a lot of nuanced things in that game and the storylines and the characters that I think resonated with people on a deeper level than just sort of your traditional game at that time that was coming out. So that continued over the years. The developers at Capcom were, trying to bring in new people. They actually, my company was a new company at the time, Just Cause Productions, and they, the reason we sort of got the gig was Capcom wanted to try something different and new, and we were sort of this. My partner and I, we were a bi-coastal sort of Japanese American company that, and we were pitching to Capcom that there would be a better. It was about the English performers. So at that up until that time, they were just basically hiring Japanese motion capture performers and then having them, and then dubbing, like Metal Gear and all of those games were cast out of Japan. They would do everything in Japanese, and then they would dub everything over in English after the fact. And our sort of pitch to Capcom and other game companies was, hey, if you go through our company, we can get you actual talent from the US, and we can do from the get-go, we can do the motion capture with English speaking performers,
Whoa.
native, and that would give us a more, instead of like a bad kung fu movie kind of dub, this would give us a more authentic performance from the characters. So then that would allow the audience to get more into the game.
The body language is different too. It's
body language is different. Yeah.
Wow,
And
that's so cool.
you'd have is Japanese actors, very good actors, but because English wasn't their native language, they would pretend or think what they thought like English acting is, right? Just over the top sort of gestures and these kinds of things. And sometimes it works and sometimes it didn't.
Yeah.
But we were sort of pitching to Capcom that we would take that burden of translation, lost in translation. That was funny. It was around that time the Bill Murray movie Lost in Translation came out.
That's cool.
So we were sort of like, see, that's what we're talking about. That issue.
Synchronicity.
And so Capcom was again we were grateful to be introduced to directors and producers like Itsuno-san and the team, the Devil May Cry team, who wanted to do something different. So they brought us in, and we were able to provide that service, which kind of launched our company, put us on the map. And they gave us a lot of responsibilities as we were sort of proving ourselves over and over. We brought in native English speaking script writers to then take the Japanese script, localize it, but go an extra mile, and then same with the performers. Everybody would take their lines. And a lot of times in that world, when you're going between cultures, the Japanese language, you'd sort of get a line and you'd give it to the actor, and the actor would see it and it doesn't really make sense, but they still kind of finagle it and do it. So we wouldn't do that. We would say, well, this doesn't make sense. And we'd sit with the actor and like, well, this is what they're trying to convey. This is sort of the idea. And they're like, oh, if that's the case, then maybe this line will work better. So we work with the actors, with on-set translators and writers, professional writers, not just translators. And we really immersed ourselves in trying to deliver a true, authentic version of what the Japanese creators were trying to convey, because a lot of stuff does. I lived in Japan for 5 years.
Wow.
I speak fluent Japanese, and
Wow.
That was sort of my contribution, because I was a fan of these games, but I saw how brutally destroyed they got when they were getting localized into English. So I was like, okay, so let's do that. So Capcom over the years gave us more and more responsibilities, from script writing to rewriting the whole script, to actually doing the motion capture. My studio, we got the equipment and we started doing motion capture in America.
Wow.
for the Resident Evil games. So it was a fun exploration and co-development on projects with Capcom over the years.
Yeah, I feel
Wow.
like you don't get that a lot. That's extremely thorough. That's like due diligence, and I guess it came from your genuine care about the source material in the games. You know what I mean? Because you're absolutely right. The kung fu movie thing that you're talking about, it happens. It does happen. Like, the stuff doesn't translate perfectly, and usually as the players, we're like, it's fine. Like, we give it grace. It's all good. But to go the extra mile, like you said, and have that like bi-coastal collaboration, that is epic. And I think that should be like standard across the board.
You'd think. That would be.
I was very, very impressed with the voice acting in Devil May Cry 5. I really believed it. Like, I believed what you guys were pitching. And, sure, it's like, it's over the top. We know that about our Japanese games and anime. Yeah. They're always over the top, very dramatic. But like at the end there, especially when you get to the top of the Qliphoth tree, not the one in hell, but like the fake top, which is near the end of the game. And you get there and there's that moment where, spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't played, highly recommend it. It's also not long either. It took me like 12 hours to play through the entire game front to back. And it's like, dude, that line when, Nero gets up there, he awakens, he regrows his arm. And another cool little subplot to Devil May Cry is, even though they're like demons, they like awaken into these godlike beings. Like, they have these awakening powers. And it's kind of like a Super Saiyan transformation mechanic. Like, it's really cool. But that line, when you find out that Virgil is Nero's father, when you're pitching that as Dante and you're like, because he's your father, I was like, oh, I got chills. I mean, super deep, super emotional, like, just stellar performance. I definitely left being a huge Devil May Cry fan. I'm sitting here Googling, like, when is Devil May Cry 6? And another synchronicity there. I just thought it was so weird that we met. And again, it's like you and my dad have known each other for many years, but you know how life is. It gets busy, out of sight, out of mind. And, people go on their own path and then you reconverge. And I just thought the timing of everything was funny. You guys are going to laugh at me, but I pay attention to synchronicities. So we meet, I play the game. I'm like, oh my God. Now I'm like, everything I can consume about Devil May Cry. Dante's coming to Fortnite, by the way. That is so obscure. That is so weird, right? Dante got announced as for sure. Well, that's one of them, as leaked as an upcoming Fortnite skin. And the Devil May Cry, there's an anime coming out. And then today before our episode, I was just Googling like, dang, I really need another game. Yesterday, they just announced a new mobile game. So there's some sort of resurgence of Devil May Cry happening right now. It's like the mobile game looks pretty cool. But I just thought that was so funny that we met at this time, and like it definitely catalyzed some new crazy. Like I want to go back and play through 3, 4, whatever the other little remakes are. I mean, I'm having a ball with it, man. It's awesome. How does that feel though? Like, how does that feel? Like, I am that character that so many millions enjoy.
At first it was kind of like, wow, because I was a fan of the game as well, playing the game and then getting cast as the role. But over time, I guess I kind of got used to it. I did the convention scene pre-COVID. I was hitting the convention scene pretty hard, going to appearances and doing autograph signs and all that stuff. And at conventions, I would usually sort of beg them to add a special panel so I could talk all my UFO and conspiracy stuff. And they would, and I was for a long time trying to like bridge those worlds a little bit, like from and you guys do a great job of it, but so many you'd think there'd be more of a crossover, but I was actually surprised. I'd be at my late night UFO talks, and I'd have like 10 people in the room, and then I do we do a Devil May Cry panel, and it's 1,000 people in the so so it just blew my mind how little of a crossover there would be, but of course the fans, I love the genre, I love the convention scenes, I love the devotion into the cosplay world and how people really get into that, and I think it's an amazing, generally safe place for young kids to hang out in and do stuff. There's there's always as those scenes get bigger, there's mishaps and things, and people take advantage of other people, and all that stuff happens. But overall, it's a safe place, and to see just the fandom around it, I love it too. I get in there with the other fans and geek out about a lot of the stuff. So
you
That's
would
really
think
cool.
there's more overlap. I'm surprised by that. I mean, a lot of our fans, maybe it's because we talk about video games a lot on our UFO centered show or our, phenomenon centered show. A lot of them, it's like they're into phenomenon video games. It's like equal. I would have expected there would have been a bigger overlap. That's crazy.
That's one of our favorite.
I was going to say, I think it's probably now it's starting to, the bridge is getting easier to cross, but 10 years ago it was very difficult.
Yeah. That makes sense, honestly. Yeah.
It's one of our favorite things to talk about. Like I was telling you last week when we were setting this up, is like we just love talking about like esoteric themes in pop culture. And in my mind, like the UFO subject is esoteric, right? They're really one and the same. I mean, there's so much of this esoteric spiritual lore in the UFO subject, but it's just so cool. And we question this all the time. Is it like, are these creators, these artists, these visionaries creating these products, are they some sort of, is there somebody above them who's initiated in some order saying, put this in it? Or like Nick says a lot, which I tend to think might be the case, are they so locked into like that mystical field of knowledge? Are they tapping into that collective unconsciousness or, collective unconscious, and like this stuff is leaking into the material? I don't know, but there definitely is an overlap subconsciously for sure, but very fascinating stuff.
Yeah, it's funny. I think more the esoteric stuff, because it's not so nail on the head. When you start getting to nuts and bolts ufology, it's almost too much for creators to. It's too exact. There's too much stuff there. So I think people, especially content creators who are looking for inspiration, it's easier to go into sort of esoteric or not so solidified concepts and beliefs, and they can pull in to their imaginary world, because that again also isn't so fixed. But so I think I would imagine for content creators, and I agree with you. I think most of the creators that I've interacted with, they're interested in the philosophy, but when you start saying, no, this stuff's real, guys, then there's almost like, it's like, no, this is fantasy land and I create fantasy for a living and I can merge those worlds. But when you start saying there's actual physicalized craft coming from other dimensions that, you know, people are interacting with, or people have interacted with, or the government has some, and, you know, these things are happening, like it's too real for them to incorporate that.
I'm just pushing fantasy, man. Like, yeah, I can totally see that. Yeah. That's cool. Well, I got to ask a few more questions about the motion capture thing, and then I want to pick your brain because I see you're very, very interested in UFOs, and I would like to get to the bottom of that. But I have to say, like, when I'm looking at your IMDb, you have a laundry list of motion capture, and I've always been very fascinated. I mean, me and Nick, we just watched The Two Towers a few weeks ago. Do you remember? And you were geeking out like, you know, this is the first motion capture ever. Like, we just love that kind of stuff, you know. We're talking about Smeagol, but when it says you do motion capture, like, let's say I'm playing Devil May Cry 5, right? And Dante is spinning around doing these like capoeira kicks. Are you really doing that?
To an extent. So that's the beauty of motion capture is you have an assisted animator that's going to take your movements and go the extra mile with it. So most of those really, you know, flying through the air and doing those crazy moves, we do, some of it's wire work, some of it is just some basic ins and outs. So you start the movement and then you kind of, or you strike a certain pose, and because there are a lot of, it's not very exciting, you know, like kung fu movies, you see the guy in the wire and they're flying and doing some really amazing things, and some green screen help and whatnot. But when you're in motion capture, a lot of times you're just on like a chair, like, you know, like my rotating chair here, and you're just striking a certain pose, and then you go to the next pose, and then the animators take over in between, and you sort of, a lot of let me see if I can find my characters here, but
we got characters.
Well, I'm sorry, my figures, you know.
Is that Bruce Lee?
This is a Bruce Lee figure, for example. So this is a standard on every motion capture set, because you're trying to explain to the animators, okay, he's going to do this, and then he's going to go into a front tuck, and then do this move, and then kick out like that. You know? So that's cool. a lot of those extravagant moves are that, and the goal is to have that seamless connection between the actual physical performance, which is 100% real. You know, when the dialogue scenes, one of the reasons I think the motion capture technology works so well is it is a 1-to-1. There's not much adjustment there, other than the costumes and things like that. But, you know, the performance is 100% there. And then when it goes to the crazy stuff, yes, there's animation help. Humans can't physically do that a lot of the times, but as much as we can do to help the animators out, and then as a action director or whoever's doing the choreography would then explain to the animators, and then it becomes a collaboration. And then the animators like, well, what if we did this? Oh yeah, let's do that. You know, so it's a team effort.
So then my last question about that subject there. In DMC5, when you get the hat of Dr. Faust and Dante puts it on and does the Michael Jackson dance, did you do the dance?
I did not do that dance. Now that dance that was not animated. That was, I mean, there was a little animation over it, but they actually brought in a pretty famous Michael Jackson, in Japanese they call it monomane, like an impersonator. So they brought in a Japanese Michael Jackson professional dancer that's
awesome,
that they captured him up and did all that. So again, I handed it off. I just did the first couple of putting the hat on and then starting the move, and then it's the other guy, and then it seamlessly comes back to me. No, I wish I could move like that.
That was the best part of the game. Dude, when
Yeah.
that happened, I'm telling you, when that happened, I just sat there laughing maniacally. Like, of
That's
course,
some of
you
your
know?
Japanese humor coming through,
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
sometimes it translates, sometimes it doesn't. Luckily,
that's funny. I just saw a
we
video
got it.
today on TikTok, or maybe it was yesterday. I saw a video in a previous DMC. I haven't played the older ones yet. I'm gonna work backwards. But I saw one of Dante just like shredding an electric guitar, and I was like, oh my god, I've gotta. This is too much. But awesome, amazing performance, amazing
Thank you.
story, dialogue, the acting. Honestly, dude, I'm not saying this because you're here. You gotta believe me. It was just some of the most jaw dropping like voice acting. Like I believed it. Like the scenes. I don't know if you knew all the characters. I don't know how it works. I don't know if you met everybody. And
Yeah.
okay,
Oh
so
yeah. Yeah. We're on set capturing
so
like yeah.
So cool.
so Nico, the girl who
Mhm.
drives the bus, something about the way they animated her face with the voice acting, I was like, wow, like this is just amazing. It was top notch. 10 out of 10. Highly recommend people out there. We're gonna move on from the DMC topic. I had to hit that because I'm a fan and it's super cool. But amazing.
Appreciate it.
I think it's on PS Plus and I think it's on Game Pass. So if you're subscribed to PS Plus or Game Pass, you're out there, you want to check it out, it should be free. But anyway, awesome game. So now we got to ask, um, what sparked your fascination in UFOs?
Wow. Well, having my sighting, I had a sighting in 2007 while
Me
working
too.
on Avatar.
Yeah. Same year.
Right. Was that the same year as yours?
The
27.
original
Yep,
experience.
yep,
Yeah.
2007.
Oh, okay. Yeah, 2007. I was working on Avatar at the time, so we just wrapped on Devil May Cry 4, right? Yeah, we wrapped on 4. Started working on Avatar, the film. I was the main stunt double for Jake Sully.
Oh
Sick.
my
in the film.
God,
So
dude,
So
that's
yeah.
amazing.
So
That's amazing.
so again, motion capture. So I sort of got into that. I was one of the earlier performers in the motion capture space because I had done Resident Evil Code Veronica way back in the 1997, if you believe
Wow.
that. So then I guess, and then I was living in Japan at the time, and then I moved back to the States and started working on Power Rangers in the early 2000s, and then I got called for some motion capture stuff just because at that time, especially in America, a lot of people didn't know what it was. Japan had sort of adopted using it in like Final Fantasy and Metal Gear and some of these, Devil May Cries and the cutscenes, right? It was more used for sort of creating cheaper animation in a sense, because to hand animate all that stuff would take a long time. So they were like, let's just throw some motion capture sensors on these guys and have them do the stuff. So I had that experience, and then I came back to the States and I was working on Power Rangers, and I got approached by the creator of Mortal Kombat, John
Nice.
Tobias, and he was he had heard about my work and was casting a game and wanted me to help sort of put together a team of martial artists for the game. It was called Tao Fang. It never went anywhere, but an old Xbox when the Xbox first came out. So I got this reputation in Hollywood as the go-to guy for motion capture because of just having the experience and understanding the technology and the limitations and the non-limitations. What is that space? What can we do and what we can't do? So by the time Avatar was around and they were casting for that, everybody was throwing my name in the hat saying, you got to call Reuben. He knows this stuff. He knows this stuff. And they were doing testing, and then they eventually called me in. I was working on Pirates of the Caribbean at the time. 4, I think 3 and 4
at World's End, right?
At World's End, yeah.
Yeah.
And the stunt coordinator Garrett Warren, he said, hey, I've been hearing your name around, why don't you come in, we're going to do some tests. And I went in and I saw how Cameron was sort of losing his patience with a lot of the performers. These were really good star performers, just because they haven't worked in that environment. They didn't understand the technology, the do's and the don'ts. So it was quite intimidating for a new performer. for me, it was, that's where I was living already for several years. I'd been in that space. So as soon as I got on set, I felt very comfortable. Cameron liked what I was doing, and then I soon became, the main stunt double for Jake Sully. And it was while working on that film. It was supposed to be a year sort of contract. It ended up being 4 years, and I was learning a lot about, at that time my goals in life were like to become an action star, to be, I was running my production company, doing motion capture, video game stuff. I was just trying to do my best in that world as far as, create awesome visual action, always looking for outside the box of what was sort of out there in the action world, because I had lived and worked in Hong Kong and Japan, and worked with Jackie Chan at the time. Before that, up to that, working in Hong Kong cinema. So I knew what like awesome action was, and that was sort of my goals. But Cameron was giving me, unknowns to me at the time, an education on indigenous cultures. We had to become, in addition to the stunt double, I was also playing a lot of random Navi characters, just background stuff. So we're riding the horses. So whenever, you saw a Navi in the background doing their thing, that was just a small group of us doing all the motion capture for several of those characters. That's the beauty of motion capture. You don't need to have a unique individual for each one of those characters. You can have three guys
they render different looks.
Yeah, they do different looks, but the body can be the same performers. Just give us a different performance. So so Cameron being the guy, he's super attention to detail. So he was having us study and learn about different indigenous cultures from around the world. And in the studio, we had pasted all over the walls. There were all of these different pictures of different indigenous from Africa, America, South America, even some European, like older Druid traditions, Asian. So we got to see their clothing, and it was sort of my job as an actor to learn and to authentically move like them, because that was the Navi. Even though they were sort of these space aliens, they had to move and act in a way that people resonated with, and sort of the base was all the different indigenous cultures from around the world. So at that time, I started studying indigenous cultures and seeing the similarities that they had in some of their beliefs and some of their how they did things, and I was starting to connect some dots. And then what we had at that time, YouTube was just coming out, and
2006.
during the 2006, right?
Yep.
So during the production of Avatar, we had a lot of downtime, because at the time, the motion capture technology, especially the way Cameron was using it at the time, was very innovative, and he was pushing the machines to do as much as they possibly could, and they would often break in the middle of filming. So whenever they break, actors in the back, we'd go hang out in the changing rooms and open up our laptops and check out, let's see what's going on YouTube. And I got exposed to the 2001 Dr. Stephen Greer's Disclosure Project, which was the first 2-hour conference, so to say, on you had folks from NASA and with different whistleblowers sort of talking about the extraterrestrial presence and how it was real. And my mind was like, what? How did I miss this? And then we saw films like The Zeitgeist and
that's
Loose
a good
Change.
one. Zeitgeist is a good one.
And they were like opening my mind to what, 9/11 wasn't what we were told. The whole religion thing is what are all these connections that are being made through the different religions
through the stars.
Yes, it was quite mind bending at the time. So I think it was just that culmination of all these different modalities and ideas and concepts that just broke my brain open to allow for this experience. in 2007, I was at home one day, one of the rare days we had off. We were sometimes working 7 days a week on set, and I was catching up doing laundry, and walked outside the laundromat and looked up, and I saw kind of a fleet of these little specks, which looked like, you know, stars in a sense, if you were to look at a bright blue sky in the middle of the day. And there's been a lot of footage of like Mexico sightings. Even in New York, they've had sightings like this where these little dots show up in the sky. And my mind was blown. I was like, what is this? Is this, you know, a UFO event? Who else is seeing this? And I thought at that time, oh, this is it. The cat's out of the bag. The whole world's going to know about UFOs. And this is real. And then the next day it was nothing. You know, the news didn't cover it at all. And I was like, oh my God, was I delusional? You know, what was going on there? And then that's when I started the deep dive into trying to figure out what I saw, and then realizing that, you know, there's a much bigger story here that's not being told. And that propelled me into the rabbit hole of trying to figure out the phenomenon and my research. So I can kind of say since 2007, I've been a pretty hardcore researcher into the phenomenon, trying to understand it, while trying to maintain my day job on these Avatar and other productions. And then eventually now, this is sort of my full-time gig.
Isn't that funny that while you had your sighting, you were working as a spiritual alien in a movie?
Pretty much. That's where
it's pretty weird.
Life gets kind of weird, where you're, you know, I'm playing an alien and then I see aliens, and then you try to tell the world about it. And I kind of kept it under wraps till 2010. And then I went in 2010, I went to one of Dr. Greer's contact retreats, CE5, Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind retreats. And that event just blew my mind, because 3 nights in a row, saw all sorts of stuff that could not have been. And I checked every corner, every way it could have been. Like, is Greer, you know, putting lanterns in the sky? Is he orchestrating this? And there was no way. I kind of did my due diligence in that regard, and came to the realization, okay, the phenomenon's real. And it's time to start talking about it. And that's when I came out after that retreat, and I started sort of being vocal.
The one in 2010?
2010, that was
okay.
The Greer one. That was Rio Rico, Arizona. Not too far from the Vatican Observatory.
Okay.
Sort of in that, they have one there, and I think they also have one in Europe, but that was in that area. And since then I've been more vocal about it, thinking that at that time I was going to get canceled for my you know, outward vocalization on the subject. But I was quite surprised that many people, especially in the video game world, they didn't think anything of it. They were like, "Oh, Reuben's in DTs, that's cool." So
that's
so it was fine.
There's quite a bit.
You go ahead.
Go ahead. I was just going to say there's quite a bit of synchronicities between us. It's wild. Like, our experiences started in 2007 as well. And then I was going to say, I didn't realize you were so heavily involved in Avatar. Like, I saw that in your IMDb, but I didn't put, you know, there was so much I'm looking at one time. And like, it's just another funny little video game synchronicity. I actually just got the new Avatar game for Christmas, which is something that I've had on my queue to play. It's not related to the movies. It's like a spinoff, but it's just kind of funny, the timing right now. But I'm a huge fan of Avatar, dude. That's super cool that you were involved in that.
It is.
Yeah.
Really
Yeah.
cool.
I've had a blessed life of being in different places on these bigger projects and interacting, you know, with guys like Cameron. Yeah, it's been a blast. I can't, no regrets. So
it sounds like you were continually having experiences, probably even up to when you met Chris.
Yeah. So let me think. That was 2000. I still
12.
Was it 2012? Okay, that's what
Yeah.
I thought, because it was before we did the citizen hearing on disclosure. And let me think. 2012. Yeah, I was doing the C5 thing. I only did the one event with Greer, but then I was on my own out, sort of taking in some of the information and protocols that he had set up, and doing small groups, going out and having experiences like that. Nothing major. And then let's see, was it 2014? I had my own sort of contact experience with a mantis being, and that really rocked my world. Again, sort of another level of confirmation that this phenomenon is real and can go to that level. And that's, what was it, 2000? Maybe that was 15. But anyways, around that time, yes, when you start doing the deep dive into this stuff, whether like Ryan and his family, whether it comes to you or you go to it, you're gonna have some high strangeness come into your life, and if you're investigating it, it's like an odds game at that point. You're just eventually, you're rolling the dice, you're gonna hit a certain number, and I think that's what happens when, for me, anyways, diving deep into it, just being around the people, like yourself, Ryan, and your dad. I was immersing myself in UFO therapy groups. I was interviewing, producing the citizen hearing disclosure with the different members of Congress and the different whistleblowers. So I was just sort of really deep in it and around all these experiences. So I think just by osmosis, it just kind of starts to come into your life in ways that you're just like, okay, yes, this stuff is real.
The bottle is open. Yeah. You can't put the genie back in the bottle.
The phenomenon can appear in so many bizarre ways. Like some of my government friends, like for example, Colonel John Alexander. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, but one of the things
I met him at the gathering. Yeah.
Cool. I didn't remember he was there, but
yeah, he was there. And it was. I remember all the jokes about him. Even
Dr. Death.
Stage. Yeah. Don't careful what you divulge to him, because
careful leaving a drink out around him, he'll poison you. Yeah, there's all kinds of stuff.
There's all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
But one of the things he told us was, like, at Skinwalker Ranch, obviously everybody knows what that is. They see beings that look like kind of like wolf beings, and you hear stories of like people in indigenous tribes doing ayahuasca down in South America, and they all similar, like you can have like groups of people doing ayahuasca and they experience some sort of crocodile entity. Like, I definitely think that there are forces of nature that can appear to us as beings of nature. I've heard several people, not just you, but several others, have come to me at some point and said they've seen some sort of mantis being or some sort of this or that, and it's very bizarre. But like, yeah, that definitely, that's very interesting. So when you say you had an experience, was it like in the wake state? What was that like?
Yeah, I want to know more. That sounds super interesting.
Yeah, it was. I remember it was a lunar eclipse the week before, and again, this all kind of made sense after the fact. But the week before, and this is in Big Bear. I live in Big Bear, California, which is about 2.5 hours outside of LA in the mountains. It's our ski hill.
Nice.
We're kind of known for our Southern California ski hill. And this was summer, I believe, getting into fall. I had gone out to Holcomb Valley and was out in the woods meditating on a rock, and this image of it was sort of the back of the head of a mantis being, in a sense, and it popped into my mind's eye, and I was like, oh, this is interesting. I had never experienced that before, and I remember my thought process at the time. I was curious. I wasn't scared. So the being, in a sense, in this image in my mind's eye, turned and looked at me, and I could see its eyes, and I just kind of got lost in its eyes because of the. It was almost like I want to say kind of a honeycomb, or when you get oil and water and it has these
like the oil bubbles where it separates.
Yeah, in the rainbow colors,
oil slick,
slick kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I remember the number of colors that were being reflected from these eyes, and I just, in my mind's eye, this is just sitting in meditation on a rock, and I sort of went into it, just getting really, again, curious and trying to understand what I was seeing. And then it just went away. And I was like, well, that was really interesting. That's crazy. I'd never experienced that before. Okay, whatever. A week later, lunar eclipse, I go up to for a hike with some friends, and at this point, I'm pretty into meditation and exploring guided meditations, and especially during times of like lunar eclipses or solstices, or at that time I had already had several ayahuasca experiences with shamans, so I was very into sort of shamanic work
Cool.
and practicing that.
I'm going to ask what that was like, if we could come back to that later.
Yeah. So just my girlfriend at the time and another friend, we went up to do some meditation on the rock and watch the lunar eclipse. And remember feeling a little weird. And I was like, man, what is this kind of heavy feeling? And I was like, this is, and our friend, she was elderly. She was also feeling very unsettled. And we almost, as the lunar eclipse was sort of happening, it was almost right at dusk. And she was kind of like, I don't feel good, let's go. And I was like, yeah, I'm not feeling so hot either, let's get going. And we sort of watched the eclipse, and I remember seeing, it was kind of one of those blood moon kind of things, and then beautiful, gorgeous eclipse. But got into the car, and I was like, okay, let's get home, I'm feeling kind of off too. And I remember before even starting the car, I started clicking, my teeth started like chattering, like kind of like this,
like
and
automatically,
like, uncontrollably. Yeah. And I was
Whoa.
like, and I was kind of shaking. I was like, what the hell's going on here?
Whoa.
And I was feeling kind of queasy, and I was like, okay, yes, let's just go home. Something weird is happening. And then my girlfriend was like, you're okay? I'm like, let's just go home. And it was only like a 15-minute drive. Got home, and my girlfriend and our friend, they went in the kitchen, and I just went to bed. I was like, I don't feel good, guys, I gotta go lay down. And in that time, which felt like about an hour, it may have been less, maybe it was more, around that time, the clicking and the clapping and the shaking just got really out of control, and I was literally flopping around like a fish on my bed. And all of this, and that being, this mantis being, sort of we had a telepathic communication going, and that's when I knew telepathic communication was real. I kind of had felt some of that telepathic stuff from my ayahuasca experiences, so I was a little bit sort of in tune or trained on that. But this was like a full on, I'm like, what is going on here? So I started having this dialogue telepathically with this being, asking all kinds of questions, because at this time I'd already started my show, Interview with Ed, asking about the different archetypes of the ETs, like the reptilians and Palladians, and I was sort of asking questions about humanity, and what is, some of the things that came through my show, some of the questions I had in my show, I was sort of like touching on some of those subjects. What is going on here? And I remember the being sort of sharing with me the grand experiment of humanity, and what this was. And if I can remember correctly, some of the ideas and concepts that were kind of coming to me was that this was an agreement. Like I remember it was pretty specific, and later I got into my show about this. But I was asking about, or I was sort of told about, there's this, the Draconians. And this is, again, my understanding at that time, because doing the deep dive into the show and ETs and the different races and all this stuff, you start conforming ideas about what it all is. And to make sense of it, you start putting labels on things, right? So I have a more fluid understanding of things now, but at the time it served. So basically, at the time, let's just made that disclaimer because I have a little bit different belief system now. But
I respect that you went out of your way to explain that.
Yeah, sorry. I just didn't want anybody to take what I'm saying like as the gospel truth or what, this is what Reuben believes, because it's not. Things evolve in time over time
Sure.
as you get exposed to the phenomenon.
You understand things deeper. You understand.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I had a label for something that it makes sense to me what you're saying.
Yeah. Okay, great. But at that time, my understanding, what the Mantis was sort of letting me know was there's this draconian. We understand, we have terms, right, in this ufology, mythology, cosmology of the reptilians and the Dracos, right? And what they had sort of told me is this faction within the Dracos. So the Dracos have been this. Again, this is in the lore. I'm just going to explain my understanding of the what other people have said, and then we can go from there. But that these Dracos have been coming and going here on Earth for a long time, and they, in the galaxy sense, they've been out there doing their thing. They're sort of dominating different races and different groups, and they have this classic image of the reptilian, this that we understand, and because of their attachment to the material, they've only been able to go so far in their evolution. So they sort of hit a wall where they're super smart, super mental. They have this mental capacity like no other race, but they're because of that, they can only evolve so much. So what they were trying to tell me is this group within the Draco actually were tired of that sort of archetype. They wanted to go beyond that, but they couldn't because of the structure of their race or something like that. So an agreement was made with a more feminine energy, and at the time I was thinking Palladian, and I think it's a combination of beings, not just limited to Palladian, but that was sort of the concept. So a distress call was sort of put out to from this faction to merge or to ask for help in their evolution, and that's where the grand experiment of, sorry, my cat's trying to get out the door.
I love all right. The feature of the cat. What's the cat's name? I have to know.
El Gato.
Oh, come on. That's amazing.
It's Odin.
That's amazing.
Odin. Oh, nice.
He's mad I'm holding him.
Nice. Actually, El Gato has showed up for me as Odin, which is a whole other
interesting
conversation. Whoa. Started as Merlin and then merged into Odin. But going back to this idea of what Earth is and what this experiment is that, and this is what was being told to me by this Mantis being, was that the Earth, one of many things, has many roles, but one of the roles that was this merging of these consciousnesses to help these reptilians, so to say, evolve. And so an agreement was made to come here to create this realm where they could sort of forget their past and merge with other energies and see if they could break the spell, so to say. So, and I know that's a ton of stuff, but that was sort of and again, this wasn't in words, this was in images and feelings and sensations, and that was my translation of that event. And later in my show, I actually interviewed synchronistically two people who had claimed to have interactions with mantis beings, and I sort of didn't tell my story. I kind of wanted to pick their brains. So as part of my show, it's in season 1, some of the last episodes, and I'm sort of I'm pulling things out of them, and they're telling me stuff, and you see my eyes go wide because some very specific things that they said resonated with like this telepathic communication. So it was kind of like my own version of cross-checking what I was getting as in a sense truth. Most people would hear that story and say, Reuben, you're batshit crazy. What are you talking about? But
now you strike me as someone who's very sane.
Not in this world. Yeah, no.
Yeah.
So that was sort of that Mantis event, and after that, while doing ayahuasca ceremonies, I've had some other interactions where they've come into the room and sort of seen them while on the medicine. That was pretty intense.
So what's I've done DMT, and I know it's similar to ayahuasca. It's like it's basically DMT's in ayahuasca, but I know that the actual experience is radically different. Like DMT for me was like 6 minutes. I know ayahuasca can be hours and hours. What was that like? I'm very curious.
Oh man, I don't think I've probably had about 20 or 30
oh my
ayahuasca
God.
experiences. I was filming a documentary around that for a while, and I had to put it on the shelf. But so for several years, I was sort of there was like 2 years there where it was almost like every other week I was in ceremony.
Oh my God.
So I've had a lot of wild experiences with the medicine on that, and I think it's a great modality. It's a great medicine, teacher, and once you're sort of, they always say, even if you've only done ayahuasca once you make that connection to Pachamama, grandmother, Earth, Mother Earth, Gaia, that energy that comes through during those experiences, you're always with her, and you can kind of ask her for guidance and stuff without even being on the medicine. And I found that true. So it is a very sacred connection that is, I think we all have it. I think sometimes just taking that chemical medicine, right, that it helps jolt your body and your soul into remembering those connections. But it has been a profound experience, and no two experiences has been the same. It's been a different experience every time. So I don't know. Other than we could probably randomly pick an experience and I could go down the lessons, but it's very powerful stuff.
Is it like eyes open, looking around you? Is it like eyes closed? Or what's that like?
Most of the time, it's sort of in eyes closed, and sort of you're in your own inner journey. But it's very visceral. It's very, when I meditate and sort of get images and concepts perhaps that come through for my well-being, I would say they're kind of, it's like, looking at an old SD video where it's kind of fuzzy and sometimes black and white, and you're getting the information. But when I'm on the medicine, it's like HD,
4K,
not even HD, it's 4K.
Yeah, it's like virtual reality. Like you're in it. Yeah,
really, it's there, and it's the lessons and the information is just super clear, as opposed to sort of my own personal meditations, trying to get the information. So in that sense, I think it can be very powerful. I have seen a lot of not so good situations depending on the people. So I would, because of that, I say it's not for everyone. Please, do your own homework and use caution when entering into those spaces, especially these days, because a lot of those spaces they're not being as contained sacredly as perhaps before, because it wasn't such a household name or household word. So there was less people doing it, and it seemed like the people that were doing it back in the day were very studied and researched. And now, because it's become such almost like a pop culture thing, right?
It's kind of commercialized a little bit.
Yeah. So with that comes less responsibility or less attention to detail, and and in those spaces, I say those spaces, it's a two-way pump. So of course you can get really amazing, good information and good entities coming into your space. But if they're not held in a sacred way and certain precautions taken, then darker things also can slip through, and
Yes,
often do.
Mm.
But it's the
absolutely.
shamans that have the ability to understand, okay, this is a more of a negative or dark energy, so we're going to put that where it needs to go over here. And they have that ability because they're trained. They've been doing this for years. Where these newer, someone who probably has done 20 or 30 ayahuasca ceremonies like myself, and like, oh, I'm a shaman now, let's go hold some ceremonies.
Yeah.
And they just don't have the experience
Mm.
to navigate those spaces. And I've seen people get injured
Mm.
psychologically
Mhm.
from some of the from them dabbling in those spaces. So just use caution and do your research.
I would 100% agree. Just speaking from like DMT and even like psilocybin mushrooms, like it's like proven scientifically that it does not have harmful effects to the body. But, if you're getting into that and, you're not prepared and you don't understand what it's going to be like, it definitely could be a psychological shock. It's not something to be taken lightly. But when used properly, I think it's an incredible, life-changing, mind-altering tool. Both psilocybin, DMT, ayahuasca, whatever, and it's definitely changed my life. I mean, it was a wild experience. My friend that put me through it was like, it's I can't remember exactly what he said. It's like it's better than any roller coaster you've ever been on. I
Can
mean,
be
it's like
it could be terrifying as well if you're not
it
if you're
can,
not
yes, but
yeah
aren't roller coasters kind of terrifying sometimes?
yeah that's
Wow, you're falling. But yeah, it's definitely crazy, man. Wow. So you said that you were sort of understanding things better now than you were then. So where are you at now?
Whew. Well, I still have been continuing my research, and I have my show Interview with Ed, where I interview people who channel different beings, and sort of collecting all of that data. And what I've come to the understanding is all of this. I think there are universal truths
Hmm.
that we can see the overlapping in different belief systems and how uh, different stories and archetypes sort of hold depending on people's individual and collective beliefs. But then there are um, individual truths that are, no matter what the collective truth is, there are the individual truths that are absolutely, per that individual, absolute truths. You can't, even if it may not be my truth, um, that person, and you cannot deny their experience or what they're seeing or experience or believing, I should say.
Mm.
That's
Hmm.
the word believing. So I've tried to relax my understanding of even like this idea of the draconians, right? I think that's someone's interpretation of that experience or that word. Like, for example, I had that mantis, what I believe, what I interpret as a visitation from a mantis being because of the images I saw and all these things and the research I've done. So that's created that belief, and then I can explain it in the way I am.
Mm.
If someone else had a different belief structure and had that experience, um, and actually, this is what one of the things that happened was I felt from that being this unconditional love,
Mm.
this deep um, this a deep love that I don't know if I felt from another being, any being alive in this realm.
Wow.
And I attributed that to angels, and I'm like, does that mean you're an angel? And then they were sort of telepathically saying similar but not quite. But we often get that people often think we're angels because um, but that realm is different. We come
Mm.
from a different realm, but we still hold that unconditional love for all of God's creations. And so one depending on your belief system, one person may actually say that, okay, that was an angel.
Mhm.
One person might say it was a demon, disguised
Right.
as an angel.
Mhm.
So there's so many different belief systems, and not to invalidate one or the other. Um, I think the phenomenon shows up to us based on our belief systems. And that's why I'm careful about projecting or saying, this mantis being this story, because I want to leave room for the fluidity for that story to grow, or go a different direction based on the observer or the experiencer, and how they might see it. And because if I'm so solidified on this is what happened to me, and this is what the way it was, and this is this, and this is the story, and that's it, then you don't leave room for growth, for more. And I believe there's a lot more to the phenomenon, into what as we're moving through our space-time realm here. We are evolving. We're evolving our understanding of what the phenomenon is. We're realizing it's not just little gray beans in spacesuits, flying around in metallic ships, but it's much more than that. And so I'm always just careful, and I want to leave room for more, for not being fixated on any of that stuff.
Every time throughout my life, being like, my dad's always been a public figure in this, and I've only come around on the internet recently since I've been an adult, but every time I've thought that I've had the phenomenon like pretty well figured out, they do some shocking thing that's like, oh, here's another magic trick to shatter your mind and leave your brains on the floor. Like, I've had them moo at me like a cow. I've seen the entire sky flash while seeing orbs. I'm telling you, like, I swear to God, it sounds crazy. I have seen the entire sky flash. I've seen the sky open up and things shoot out. I've seen so many crazy things, and I'm like, I mean, you're running out of ways to shock me here. Like, I totally get it. It's like, yeah, there's so many people out there who think aliens, they come from another place. But I mean, yeah, they come from another place, but it's like a magical dimension, And I think what you're saying, you put it very well. It's like, they do tend to appear different ways to different people. I don't know 100% that they only appear based on our belief system, but I know that they appear different ways to different people, and also regionally. I think the beliefs of the region have something to do with it too. But then
Yeah.
there are beings that are outside of that. And I think, like you said, those universal objective truths that are like, let me put it like this, from my understanding, speaking with Jim Simivan. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this figure, but he's a very high ranking
Oh yeah,
CIA.
To the Stars. He was in part of the To the Stars, and
Right. He still is. But
okay.
he told me one time we were at a private party. Actually, the guy who hosted the gathering, we were at his house, at his brother's
Oh,
house. Actually, we were at
okay.
his twin brother's house, and we were having an Easter party. And Colonel Alexander and Jim Simivan was there, and my family was there, and I was picking his brain. Probably my favorite part about growing up, being questioned and interrogated and prodded by people in the intelligence communities, is I didn't give a shit who they were. I asked whatever question I wanted to ask. You're coming to me. I have questions too, and I didn't play the whole like, yes, sir, like you're this, and I, won't. No, I rocked the boat. And I
Awesome.
straight up asked him. I didn't say the word Illuminati, but I was like, is there a shadow government? And it's funny because when you ask these people in these positions certain questions, you can, especially studying psychology and learning about like not microaggressions, micro expressions.
Hmm.
You see the look on their face where they're like, oh, certain questions, and he gets this little smile, and he's like, yeah, I've rubbed some shoulders with some people in the shadow government. And I said something like, I don't remember the question I asked, but the answer he gave me about the phenomenon was what they understand in these programs in the Department of Defense. This is like high level what the U.S. government believes, told to me by a CIA official. They believe that there are levels to dimensional existence. It's like a spectrum, like where we are. You could say we're like base, we're like material beings in the material world. We have ESP, psychic phenomenon, but we're not very far up that sliding scale of existence. And the higher you go up the spectrum of existence, they become more thought based. It's like a continuum of evolution of beings and consciousness. And they believe, based on their observation, that there are beings that are so powerful that they exist purely in the form of thought, and that through thought alone they can destroy worlds. Straight up, he told me that. He's like, yeah, there's races of beings like the lady that they can just destroy worlds with their thoughts, and what can we do about that? And yeah, that's just interesting that like it would appear to you a certain way, and then I've heard people say, it appears like they said it's Skinwalker like a wolf, but everything in my family, everything we've seen has been pure light. So it's like,
right. and I'd like to piggyback on that just because to play devil's advocate in a sense, because that absolutely. So like I was saying, these Dracos, like we have the name for the Dracos, right? So they're thought, and again, you don't have to picture them as reptilians. You can just think about that archetype of beings that are so attached to the physical, and the physical is attached to the mind, and the mind is, yes, so powerful that they can manifest or unmanifest, destroy, with the power of thought. And that is an evolutionary stream that those specific beings, and I would say the beings that hang out in the US government and the military, like that, they go in that stream because they're very mind oriented, right? It's all about strategy and how do we overpower our adversaries with might, with physical brute force, and strategizing about using weapons and tactics and these types of things. Now, I would say probably, this is my guess, with the lady, when you say the lady, we're talking about the being that your dad interacted with. I would say, this is just what my intuitiveness says, that being is more of a heart-centered being, a being that would, of course, have mental abilities, but the evolutionary path was more geared into the heart. And we now know through like heart math and other Greg Braden and other researchers that the heart actually contains more, I forget the type of
there's neurons.
It's neurons,
right?
Yeah.
Right. Then
there's 80,000 neurons on the heart.
And that's a different evolutionary path, where beings that are more heart-centered do have, there is a connection to the mental capacity, but it becomes less of a strategizing of overpowering one or another, but more of an inclusive sort of, we're all in this together, how do we help each other kind of thing. So harmonious. I think that's more harmonious. Yeah. And I think that's where a lot of the indigenous cultures were more connected to on that path of evolution, where we've seen other sort of conquering civilizations that are more on the mental side, Genghis Khan or Napoleon or something like that. Right. So so I would say there's a balance in the universe between these concepts of heart and mind, and where I hope to see humanity evolve into is more in the heart-centeredness of things. So we're not, because when you get stuck in the mind, it can be quite destructive.
Yeah, like the ego.
Exactly.
Like the wisdom, and for anybody out there listening and being like, "Whoa, this is weird." I mean, to me, it sounds like it just sounds like another skin. It sounds like another choice of words to describe the doctrine of the esoteric philosophy, which is like we're supposed to be reducing the ego and living in, some people say Christ consciousness. It's just like, it's literally like you said, it's just heart centered. It's love and compassion and unity. And it's like we can have all these different words for, the Buddhists would call the beings devas, right? Or Christians would say angels, or Irish would say fairies or whatever. But it's like, I don't like that people are so stuck on the, what do we call it? What is the word? It's like, forget about that. What's the meaning? Right.
You quoted something recently in an episode. When you give something a name, you lose it, or something.
It's from the Tao. It's the Tao.
Right.
The Tao, Tao, whatever. That's like, they say, like when you try to name the force, God, whatever, this ineffable energy, when you try to name it, when you try to put it in a boundary, you push it away. You've lost it. You don't understand it anymore. Even
in the Kabbalah episode, we were talking about how they believe, like, like, how dare you, essentially, like, how dare you try
Yeah.
to understand
Yeah.
God, like even what God's name is, like, how dare you? You know,
Yeah.
like it's kind of an overlap between a lot of different cultures that, like, you're just not gonna get it. Like, there's no getting it. You could get a version of it, and like the core of it could be true, but like you said, different skins. You know,
Yeah. From video game terminology, different skins, right?
yeah,
But
different
Yeah.
Fortnite skins.
we're saying the same thing, and
Yeah.
like, that's really profound the way you put it that way, like heart centered. And it's funny that you say that, because the lady told my dad that she is the manifestation of the universal force of love,
Come on now,
Yeah.
heart centered.
we're getting a lot of overlap.
Yeah, that's that during my exploration into this, wacky world of paranormal, in the phenomenon, that to me that's been sort of to categorize, and again, even like you were saying, to label, to categorize is not is sort of doing an injustice to the phenomenon itself, but just to better navigate those worlds. And what I've noticed is there is a distinction between the different beings or energies that go more into the mind than
Mhm.
and the ones that go more into the heart. Not to say that one is lacking, or has no heart, or has no, or like the heart center beings have no mind. That, of course, that those are aspects that we all have. As humans, we it's mind, body, soul, right? So we're constantly fluctuating between the physical, the non-physical, and then the mental, and then the heart. So it's just a way, especially of late, because we have so many mental hoops to go through in our societal affairs and news cycles, and all the stuff that's going on. What I found is a great uh, uh, sort of filter. If my mind can't figure it out, then I bring whatever subject matter, or whatever I'm sort of contemplating, go sit in meditation, try to get out of my head and just bring it into my physical being, my actual heart, in
Mm.
meditation, and I feel what that feels like, and I bring in the emotions, and then that helps me make, in a sense, clear decisions. And a lot of times my heart says, you're not, don't go there right now, or just don't,
Mm.
don't, if you can't come with a clear decision, it's not time. And
Mm.
then I think that's where the heart is more relaxed in that sense. The heart doesn't have to figure it out, as they're trying to say before, trying to add a name to these different beings or whatever it is. In the heart space, it's like, it's okay, just allow it to be what it is.
Yeah.
And if you can't figure it out now, eventually you will. But you have to give that allowance, and you
Mm.
can't be so quick to label it. And that's what goes back to the whole Mantis thing, and why I made that disclaimer, is because that's my understanding now more, is to get less out of the head, and trying to put names and labels on everything that happened, and just be more in the heart.
That's really cool, because even if you can't name something, your heart will still feel something towards it. Like, you're following your raw intuition. And I really like your viewpoint in general, because a lot of people may hear, like, don't even try to give it a name. Like, the whole, how dare you even try to, and that might deter them from trying to learn more about different interpretations of the phenomenon, of different cultures or what have you. But I think it's kind of clicking with me now that it's actually, it can be really good to learn a lot of that stuff without attachment.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
point is to keep an open mind.
I love that.
The point is to
Yep.
keep the cup empty.
Yeah,
You know?
Exactly.
that's fascinating. It's
As
it's the attachment
right.
that brings kind of like the chaos, the confusion. That's really
That's
fascinating.
what I really love about your dad's message, is you have all these sort of military guys and people, the nuts and bolts guys, trying to figure it out, right? And they want to label it, right? And your dad just kind of keeps throwing them curveballs, like, well, it's, it is what it wants to be, and
Mhm.
I feel your dad has such a big heart in this, and I'm excited that he's getting the attention he is by these different agencies and groups and folks, because for so long, those groups, those people have been in a search, in a mental search for the phenomenon, and they end up getting what they asked for. They're what's his name, Alex Crowley, and these
Aleister Crowley, yeah.
Aleister Crowley, and
Yeah.
Did you hear that, Alex? Alex Crowley.
We have a joke on our show. His name, our producer's name is Alex, and I call him Alexter Crowley. That's pretty funny that just happened.
We all heard that. Alex is here. He's not mic'd up, but he just heard that. Alex Crowley confirmed.
That's awesome.
Aleister Crowley, all right.
Yeah.
And who was the there was another sort of esoteric
Jack
scientist.
Parsons.
That's right, Jack Parsons.
Jack
right?
Parsons of JPL, Jet Propulsion Laboratories. He
JPL.
created that. Yeah.
So you have those cats, right? And we know that world, and they're going down that sort of mental path, and they're interacting with beings that
That's where grays come from.
That's a large percentage of them. Yeah, I think not all of them, but
I mean, like the first representation in history, like the first ever understanding of a gray was from Aleister Crowley. He in the 40s he channeled. He believed. Obviously, this is all speculation, and it's from writings from almost 100 years ago. But he believed that he channeled with this entity called Iwas. And when he was doing one of his channeling sessions, he drew. This is a hand drawing from Aleister Crowley. It's just like a gray being, and his name is Lam, Lam, and that's the first ever depiction of like a gray alien. Was actually like a really dark channeling session from a dark occultist, of course. I mean.
Yeah, and then you have the during the Nazi era, the Aldebaran group through the Vril Society, and they're connecting into those darker beings that are giving them technologies to create, war machines. So these are, and that's why I feel it's like maybe you've heard the term "what you put out is what you get back," and that's sort of the idea that. The people who are seeking this information through whatever esoteric practices that they have, whether it's channeling or seances or conjuring up these beings, they're going to get sort of these heavier, darker beings that come through and give them what they're asking for. That doesn't mean all the beings are that way.
Right, exactly.
It means that those specific people with those specific agendas are seeking certain things, and they're going to get it. And to keep an open mind and an open heart, that when we want to connect to more heart-centered beings, and we don't have an attachment to a specific outcome for, we just want the betterment of humanity. And ourselves and our families, then different types of beings show up, and that's maybe when we get like the bull and the woman who shows up for your dad. And I think these are conversations that need to be had in the collective a little bit more, because unfortunately, a lot of those more negative oriented, or I should say, not pro-humanity. Folks who have the talking piece right now are the ones that are sort of talking. You have Tucker Carlson, who's very pro humanity, but he's been interacting as well as you guys and many other people who interact with sort of some of these government groups, and there's a lot of talk about darkness and evil, and there's a spiritual war, and there's a lot of negative speak about the phenomenon, and I believe it's all absolutely true, but I think simultaneously we need to be having the light question about that there are equally, if not greater, light beings and other entities that do have the best of humanity in mind for its growth, spiritual and physical growth, and how we can get to that place where we are in a better place to do things. So I don't know. I'm probably going off on too many tangents.
I'm
theme of the show. That's okay.
I thought that was very profound, man. I really was picking up what you were putting down there. And I was just thinking I don't know how busy your schedule is. I probably could imagine it's extremely insane. But I would be really interested to see some time where you fly out and hang out with us and we skywatch. I bet we'd have some
Oh
pretty
yeah.
wild sightings. That's something that we should talk about in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I do. I haven't so much this year, but I often do. So, Stephen Greer and his protocols, and it was funny because when I had your dad on, I think when I first reached out to him, I'm like, oh, I see you've been doing a lot of summoning, and he said, oh, I don't like that word summoning, and I was like, oh, perfect. I understand because that it does come. It's a loaded word.
It is.
Especially in the religious context and these types of things. But I do sort of my version of that. I'm not anywhere as your dad definitely is tapping into something very unique. But we often in my local communities here we do sky watches or I call it contact work essentially. And it's using some of Greer's original protocols, but sort of taking it to the next level with meditation, sound, calling in the right, setting the field of intention. And when you get a group, especially when there's more people involved, I've noticed the likelihood of the phenomenon showing up seems to be, especially if everybody's in sync. Now, if you do have
Yes.
if there's one person in the group that is not on the same page, the phenomenon won't show up. And the messages I've got is they're not in the fear making business, at least the ones that we're trying to call in.
They're not.
They stay away because they know some people might be triggered in that fear sense. So if everybody can be sort of open-minded and open-hearted to call them in, we've had some wild sightings out here in California.
I had so I mean Ryan and I met around 13, something like that. The first time that I went to his house, and for the first multiple years of me knowing about this subject matter, I was terrified. And like, I don't know why. It was just maybe it was a religious trauma thing, who knows, but I didn't start having sightings and experiences until the fear went away. The fear went away, that's when I start seeing things. And now, and what you're saying with like, if everyone's not on the same page, oh yeah, Chris will make sure everybody's on the same page. Hey, cut the football chat. Let's focus. Let's look up. Let's focus our thoughts, our feelings, our emotions. Let's pray. Like what you're saying is dead on from what I've experienced.
Yeah, it's true. And we have had situations even recently where there have been skeptics in the group and we still see something. But I mean, that's a deeper philosophical question, because some of these people, I think, depending on how they act, deserve to be shocked a little bit. Like, from what I understand, the beings aren't in the business of breaking people's free will, and like Dad was recently at a like a 50+ person group. What do you call it, Alex? It was you were there. It was a convention, right? It was like a small convention, about 70 people. And there was a very audible, rude skeptic in the group. And they would be seeing orbs as a group. And then the guy would vocalize and he'd say, it's a firefly, it's a satellite, whatever, and it would disappear. And Dad would say, I don't remember. I mean, Alex could attest to what he said. I wasn't there. But he would get the group refocused. They would start seeing things. And it's just like, sometimes even with a skeptic present or just a negative Nancy, it still can be seen, but it dims the experience overall. There was another thing I did recently with Dad, and like 9 other people were there. We were out on the beach here, and there was a skeptic in the group who still saw things, and he left just like arm around us in the photo, big believer. Like, his wife dragged him. She was a big believer. He didn't want anything to do with it. He wouldn't get in our group photos at first. By the end of the night, he was all, I want to be in the picture. It's funny. It was awesome. But generally, that is true in my experience.
Yeah, and I think we're getting to, now they're talking about beans in the Miami malls, right? So we're having, I think we've hit. I think what's happened in Congress, last summer with David Grush and David Fravor and Ryan Graves testifying, and the news cycles with Rogan and others doing the podcast and talking about this subject, and it's seeding the collective now, where I think we've hit that critical mass of it's no longer a question of
Are they real?
Are they real or not? So this sort of have you heard that story? I think it was in What the Bleep, where like when the I don't know if it was the Mayflower or whenever the ships first were coming, Columbus and the ships were first coming over, and the natives were they were sort of parked outside a little bit away offshore, but they were just sort of parked there for several days, and the natives couldn't even see it. They couldn't even see
Right.
the ships. And it wasn't until the shaman went into a trance, the shaman of the village or whatever, and then actually had the concept of what they were, and then told the villagers, hey, there's something out there. There are ships, or there are beings, there are other physical humans, not from our lands, but they're out there. And then it was, once it was sort of said, then the natives could see the ships, and then sort of it took several days for that to sort of happen. So I use that analogy that if enough people, if it's not in their consciousness, if it's just outside of their worldview, then we're, even though they may be there, you can't see them. So as we're seeding the collective with this idea that this stuff is real, guys, this is not video games, this is not movies, this is not make believe. There are real beings from other dimensions all around us all the time. And the more that seeds into the collective consciousness, the more they're actually showing up, or the more we can actually see them. They've probably always been there, but we can now acknowledge the fact that it's real. And I think we're at that place now where we've hit that critical mass, in a sense, where now it's like anything goes. I think the phenomenon is going to continue to show up in the malls, or wherever however it decides to show up. And I think people are going to be taking it seriously now, and we're going to have our share of hoaxes, and I'm still, the Miami thing is a whole nother rabbit hole we could go down, but there's going to be hoaxes, there's going to be taking advantage of false flag stuff.
That's what the primary message to my dad from the lady was, that they are going to commit a mass deception in the final stages of this information. It's on the cusp of breaking out. And I've been like buried deep down in a vault of the UFO subject since 2007, with my family being prodded by the Department of Defense. We've been in the heart of it. And I have seen, looking around me, people I know out in the world, I have seen people very gradually, until recently, very exponentially, just begin to rapidly shift to where it's all anyone's ever talking about anymore, And my point is, I think you're exactly right. I was just on Danny Jones last month, as you know. I know you saw it and you're aware of that, but I was just on there, and one of the things I said on there, and he put the clip out, and I've been sharing the clip. I said that that's the way, as I understand it, that the phenomenon is going to the grand reveal, right? It's like they're not in the business of breaking our free will. That people always ask. One of the main questions we get 1,000 different cookie cutter questions over and over and over. What the craft look like? What the being look like? This, that, and the other. And one of the questions is, why don't they just appear for everybody? And my answer to that was, they're not in the business of breaking free will. And as I understand it, the game is, once the majority of the collective consciousness, like say 51% or above, understands and is aware of this phenomenon, and to some capacity acknowledges and believes that it is there, then I think it's free game. Poof. You know what I mean? Right. But right now, it's not the collective. Exactly like you said, I'm 100% in line. I'm very pleased that you said that too. It's very synchronistic. But and
I think especially for I think for either side. So if we're talking about different sides of the phenomenon, whether it's like we were saying, the heart-centered or the more mental-centered beings, I think either way, it's my understanding from my interactions that if one side, say the negatively oriented beings, sort of push that free will envelope a little bit, where they show up or do things in a sense against the free will of general humanity or certain individuals, then that gives a permission slip for the light to come in and sort of do damage control.
Yeah.
So that's the universal balance that we have is, and sometimes those rules are broken, and then damage, cleanup crews come in and fix the situation, and vice versa. And I think that's why the light is very careful, because they know if they break that agreement, the free will agreement, then some really nasty things could come in. So it's this power game of groups that are, wanting to steer and manipulate humanity and to their own liking, but there's still rules of engagement, so to say, that they have to play by.
Are we talking about Star Wars? Because it sounds so much like the Force, like the Jedi and the Sith. That's like our most referenced pop culture thing on this show. And I think it's one of the most pure examples of that, like, psychic download and the core truth being leaked into fiction, but I mean, I was just listening and I was like, okay, check, like, it's very similar to the balance of the Force, and that story is told time and time and time and time again. I mean, if you kind of think about it in a way, like even Dante's Inferno with Dante and his brother, it's Virgil, right? It's
in Devil May Cry.
Inferno, I think in Devil May Cry it is.
Oh, that's what I meant. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Okay.
But
Devil May Cry. I said Dante's Inferno.
But that's where the name comes from. He's descending into hell.
Exactly. But in Devil May Cry, that's kind of like Cain and Abel, like the good, the evil, the brothers, like it's the constant. Yes. It's the duality, It's just so funny. I was like, this is Star Wars, but it's real. That's
what I was saying. That's, I think, why Devil May Cry has that appeal on a subconscious level, because these are storylines that are seated in our DNA, and as we explore them more, we'll find out maybe more truths on human origins and how that all comes into play. But yeah, this is why our science fiction reflects real life and vice versa, and those worlds are getting pretty dicey as far as the line.
The line is blurred. Yeah,
very much.
Absolutely. I have to ask, what's your martial art background?
So I started with as a young kid, I had a little bit of Taekwondo experience, and then moved to Japan at the age of 19, and ended up studying Aikido. That was pretty easy to access out there. So I learned some good rolling skills, and then my drive into wanting to be more cinema oriented. Aikido, there's only so much. The rolls are good, but other than that, it's not. There's not a whole lot of kicks and punches. I mean, Seagal did a good job of making it cinematic, look good on film, but I was looking for more, so I started. Big fan of Bruce Lee, as you can tell with the stuff.
Yeah.
So got into Jeet Kune Do and
awesome.
Learned some Wing Chun basics, and then kicking with Taekwondo, and then once you go into the action cinema world, I was like a sponge, just absorbing every martial art that I could possibly get my hands on. But I would say probably the one I stayed the most diligent with was different forms of karate, Shotokan, and some judo, jiu-jitsu, and then Aikido. Those are kind of my main, more Japanese arts, because that was where I was based, even though I went to Hong Kong for a minute and worked there. But yeah,
that's awesome.
A little bit of everything.
Yeah.
Very colorful rainbow of martial arts there. I actually studied Wing Chun for 4 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
right.
I love it. Love it to death. And Jeet Kune Do, obviously, because of the connection there with Bruce Lee. Very cool. I know they also do Chi Sao, which is awesome, but super cool. And then I guess I have to say, before we started, you said you had some questions for us. Do you still feel like there's anything you wanted to ask us?
Well, I do know. Well, since you mentioned, Jim Semivan, John Alexander,
John Alexander.
and that I would say that crew of former CIA or current CIA, because what's the saying?
Never really former, yeah.
Yeah, you never really leave it. You guys have been exposed to that group specifically more than others, and I'm glad you asked those questions. And I'm just curious, have you been able to see a specific agenda? Because we know the To the Stars, and we know the New York Times article, and we know that certain players or speak about certain events, but then they tend to leave out other events. They tend to leave out. They're very selective in what they decide to talk about in the public forums. And I'm wondering if you've been able to see a narrative, a specific narrative that's being driven through some of those groups.
You might not like it, but yes, the narrative that I've seen from many of these, you could say, bad faith UFO disclosure groups is actually reptilians. It's what they want to push. They want to push this idea that there's this bad negative force out there dominating the whole galaxy. We got to militarize. I mean, this isn't something that they have outright said to the public, but it's what it's building to. Whether it's going to end up as reptilians or, some beings hopping through a portal at the mall with really sexy holograms, just saying. But, the idea here is that the agenda, I'm just going to call it like I see it, is to build this picture that there is a massive, very powerful, negative fleet of warlike beings, and God, forget it. It's not real. We don't have data of it. I've literally been like, it's about God. They're like, we don't know if God's real. We've never seen it. We've never experienced it. We don't have the data. I'm like, yeah, dude, okay, sure. You're the one coming to us for questions. We're seeing all these beings, But yeah, it's the agenda is to completely remove any sort of connection to, as you like to say, which I love, and I'm going to start saying this, heart-centered or spirit, or just connection to the force, to God, to consciousness, to the eternal, right? That's the agenda. It's to remove that and to sort of subconsciously plant this fear towards the phenomenon and building this image of just a dark, nasty alien force. That's the agenda. That's the deception. And there are people in multiple camps of the CIA who push this message. And then there are people who, like, for example, Jim Semivan. He's a nice guy. And I've talked to him about reptilians before. He's like, yeah, elements of that story I find to be true. But also, your family story, 100% I believe it. You need to go shout it to the rooftops and tell the whole world. And we're like, okay. And, he's never tried to censor us. He's never tried to make us be quiet. But then there are other people in other institutions like NASA, and I maybe I could tell you off air, but there are some other individuals who have hard tried to censor us and have actually given us death threats. It's very complicated.
Wow. You mean never a straight answer, NASA?
Never a straight answer.
Yeah,
I love that.
Yeah,
that's great.
Yeah, that's really deep. But yeah. So here's my philosophy. At the end of the day, I just 100% believe. Sure, when there's dark, there's light, right? If you can be hot, you can be cold. There's always a balance to the universe. There's always a dark and a light. But my philosophy is, I don't care. All I care about is the light. All I care about is, I used to sit around and try to learn everything about the darkness. And when I first broke away from being a hardcore Christian and really leaning into this very mysterious, mystical, occult life of dealing with beings that pop through, and then I'm going to church on Sunday, I'm like, something has to give here. You can't serve two masters. I can't go and be a faithful Christian, but also know that there's more, right? And I walked away from that old life. And I guess where I've ended up now is, all that matters is the light. Truly, like, all that matters is understanding that there is hope, there is benevolence in the universe, there is an intelligent design and a force that is very near and dear to us and that comes when we call. I think it's in us. I think it's in the air. I think it's in the water. It's in your breath. It's in your mind. It's in your body. It's in your spirit. It's everywhere. It's like the Matrix, right? It can't be nowhere, right? It's like the primordial spiritual force that permeates all things, and that's all that fucking matters. It's just living a life trying to be connected to that and shunning the dark force, shunning the negativity. Yes, there's an agenda. There's absolutely an agenda, and I will say, I probably should be a little bit more careful about saying particular names of particular people anymore because of shadow banning and things like that. But yeah, there's some people in NASA that don't like some of the things I've said.
Yeah, well, I say that just because it's most researchers, I think, that are doing the deep dive can see that happening, and I thank you for those words, because I knew there was something different with you, your dad, and the messaging. Even though there may be some of those people nearby, I'm like, something's not adding up here.
I
And
get
then
it.
yeah,
I get it.
and I talked to you, I talked to your dad, and I'm like, these guys are the most heart-centered, awesome people. And if anything, what I believe is just some, if some of these sort of nefarious or not the best intentioned people that may be coming close to you, if anything, they're gonna get a heart awakening.
Mm.
And I just want to say, keep doing what you're doing, because we need more of it.
Was that the uncomfortable question?
Yeah, because I kind of didn't know. It sounds like you're very much aware of it, and I didn't know how much, and that was just kind of, I didn't know what the answer. It turned out to be not uncomfortable at all.
No, not at all, dude. Thousands of people. I mean, you go look on Reddit and it's all we're CIA plants or we're mental patients. I mean, it's just pick your lane, like that's part and parcel of, you take a picture of somebody in the CIA. It's like, oh, look, they're plants. It's like, really? I mean, okay. I guess it's not common that this happens. I don't know anybody else in my entire life that's been in this position, but it's a reasonable question. I appreciate you asking.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if it was asked here before or not, but I just have to do my due diligence as a researcher, and But again, I can feel my heart says you guys are doing a great thing, and every time that was a question I sort of had ready for your dad, but his energy, his heart energy was just so blasted. My members and my crew open. I was like, "There's no way this guy is on any sort of bad team, so to say, if you want to put it in that context." It's just like and if he's around those people, he's just going to blow open their hearts. And
we have
awesome.
Had bad people around us, Reuben. Like that's the thing. 17 years dealing with. It's just open book. Anybody from the government that came, we said, sure, come in. We have had people give us death threats. We have had people threaten to silence. Even recently, my episode on Danny Jones was shadow banned. Like there are bad.
Wow.
I am never, to you or to anyone in the world, I am never going to be the guy that's like, they're all good. You got it all wrong. Like,
Sure.
No. I think most are probably bad.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I'm very much in line with that line of questioning. It's just, I'm in the uncomfortable position of actually knowing these people. Everyone else out there is reading about it in the fantastical world of theory. I'm like actually living in it, and it's a little more nuanced than the fantastical world of theory. And, it's complicated, but it's real.
It is. I mean, I have friends in those arenas as well. And I'm constantly getting questions sometimes as well. And I just have to go with that there are obvious there are obvious agendas that, like you were just saying, this one agenda that I think that's one of them. Have you heard let me just throw this out. Have you heard the UFO religion agenda?
Like they're creating a religion?
Yeah, like it's the idea that this the phenomenon is going to take over Catholicism in the sense, and there's going to be specific gatekeepers that are going to be like the new priest that are going to have they're the chosen ones that have the keys. So if people want to, and basically just a copy of the current religious structures that we have, and then that agenda is sort of being pushed into the collective. So people think, oh, that person has superpowers, or this person is a gatekeeper. So to talk to the phenomenon, to get in touch with it, I need to go through that person. And then basically we just have a rehash of the whole religious thing that we've been dealing with for thousands of years on this planet. I don't think that's ever going to come to play, but I've heard that there are that agenda is part of some of these shadowy government groups that are trying to that's one of their game plans, one of their playbooks.
I haven't heard of that one, but that's very interesting. Yeah, no, I'm not familiar with that one, but I mean, it makes sense, right?
Right, yeah, and that's where we're getting, sort of the fear aspects of the seeding of the collective consciousness with the fear stuff. And it's just something to be careful of, I think. I think where we're headed ultimately is we're going to have a wild ride the next couple of years here as people see the ships, so to say, as they start to recognize the ships, like in the native story of off the coast, and they can they sort of materialize. But I think as we get through it, and the more conversations we have like this, then people, those sort of agendas will just by default fall to the wayside. They're not going to be able to keep the fear going, and they're not going to be able to keep these limited hangout groups going, because it just humans, we are evolving at such a fast pace now with the conversation, the subject, the technology, and I think we're going to see the prophecies of 1,000 years of peace and these types of things are right there. They're right on the horizon. I think we just do what we keep doing here by having these awesome conversations, and then eventually the rest of humanity will catch on, and we can let all the silliness, the silly agendas fall to the wayside.
Yeah, Age of Aquarius. I'm right there with you.
Yep.
Well, wow. I mean, this is like. This has been amazing. Is there anything on your heart that you feel like is unsaid?
For now, I'm looking forward to have you on my show in a couple months here, and then I'll be definitely sourcing this conversation and bringing up some more questions. So
yeah, absolutely.
Excited about it.
This has been a blast. You have been just a fantastic special guest. I know everybody at home listening absolutely loved this. Please tell them where they can support you in your work, Reuben.
So I have my show, Interview with Ed, which stands for Extra Dimensionals. interviewwithed.org is my website. I have a TV show that's been on Gaia. It's now on Tubi, where I interview these channelers, these people that go into an altered state, and these beings come through, and I ask them all kinds of questions. It's lots of fun. And experiencers as well. And I have a new membership portal where people can pop in every week and sort of be part of the conversation. And that's all accessed through my website, interviewwithed.org. And super excited just to keep going down the rabbit hole and talk to folks like yourself who've been deep down the rabbit hole as I have, and even further in many cases. So yeah, come hang out with us. We're it's a group. It's no secrets. We're an open book.
I meant to ask you what you thought about like our documentary that had just come out, the History Channel one. So maybe we can save that for when I hop on your program.
Absolutely. Yeah. Great work. And I hear there's more in the works.
Yeah. Oh, maybe. there might be.
Watch it.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, so we have a little silly exit ritual in our show. I honestly don't know why I don't even know when this started, but we, for some reason, like to chant "Bye guys" at the same time. So
chant?
Are you ready?
Like repeat it?
Well, I mean, I'm just thinking all three of us in one. Okay. All right, you ready? 3, 2, 1. Bye guys.
Bye guys.
Thank you so much for watching. If you want to see more, check out our other videos.
And before you go, don't forget to subscribe. See you next week. Peace.